أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين حمدا يوافي نعمه ويكافئ مزيده وصلى الله على سيدنا ومولانا وحبيبنا محمد وعلى آله المجاهدين وعلى أصحابه من الأنصار والمهاجرين وَمَنْ تَبِعَهُمْ بِإِحْسَانٍ إِلَى يَوْمِ الدِّينِ. Dear brothers, dear sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. May this Jumu'ah be a Jumu'ah of blessings and barakah to all of you, and may Allah guide us in whatever time period is left for us in our earthly presence. Okay, so as a small introduction here, we are speaking about the conversion in today's world of those who are the Bani Israeli characters and those who are the Bani Umawi characters. You see what's happening in today's world. You have the Abrahamic initiative, you have people who have wealth and power are speaking to us about the camaraderie and the brotherhood of Muslims and Christians and Jews. Now, all of this sounds very appealing to the innocent person who is not versed on how deep-rooted the animosity of al-Yahud and al-Ladina ashraku is towards those who have committed themselves to Allah and His Prophet. So as we continue down this path, discovering our history in our present and understanding our history through our present time, we will continue to shed light on the dark corner of Islamic politics way back 14 centuries ago after the Khilafah and the Imamah. Last time, I think we signed off on the note that it was, and this is agreed to in all history books. We're not, coming up with some type of piece of information that is weird. No, this information is there for those of us who are willing to read and investigate and understand. So we said there is no doubt, scholarly doubt, that it was Muawiyah who executed Hujr ibn Adi. Hujr ibn Adi was a Sahabi. You can look him up. Of course, we don't have time here to go through the biographies of these different Sahabis that we will be mentioning, or these different Islamic personalities at the beginning of in the few first centuries of Islam. But Hujr ibn Adi was a Sahabi. And for those of us who call Muawiyah a Sahabi, they should have enough integrity and enough courage to ask themselves, why is a Sahabi killing another Sahabi? And what was, according to all these history books, you pick your own, what was the quote-unquote crime of Hujr ibn Adi? In the sight of Muawiyah, his crime was that he would not take issue with Imam Ali. So for that, he was executed. Now we go to another person who, his name is not going to be very familiar to you, or at least 90% of you. His name is Ubaidullah ibn Musa al-Absi al-Kufi. He is one of the most reliable person persons in the transmission of hadith. He is found in all of the majority of the books of hadith, the reliable books of hadith, in all as-sihah as-sitta, the 6 books of hadiths that are considered to be authentic. I personally have a request from everyone and anyone to try to filter these books of hadiths from statements that cannot have been expressed by Allah's Prophet, yet they pass as hadiths. But this is just a parenthetical interjection here. So this Ubaydullah, by the way, he was one of the shuyukh of Al-Imam al-Bukhari. Al-Imam al-Bukhari, who wrote what is considered to be the most authentic book of hadiths. This is one of his mentors, one of his teachers, Ubaydullah. So what is it with Ubaydullah? He not only disliked Muawiyah the person, he also disliked the name Muawiyah. And when I was covering this territory, it occurred to me, and I'm passing on this observation to you, in the general Muslim public throughout my lifetime, I'm speaking about long decades of Islamic involvement, the only time I came across a person whose name was Muawiyah was when I was a student at Beirut Arab University. This was like maybe 1972, give or take a year. I was at a restaurant, a takeaway, and one person was calling the other person. The person who was yelling, shouting for the other person to hear him appeared to be from Sudan. I didn't ask him, just from the accent and from the appearance, it appeared to be from Sudan. And he was calling I guess it was his friend or classmate or whoever, because we were in the university area there. And he's calling him Muawiyah, Muawiyah. That's the only time in my life that I've encountered someone having a name Muawiyah, which should, I think, for those who cannot read history accurately and cannot gauge the psychology of contemporary Muslims accurately, or the Muslims in general accurately, this is a very strong statement that in the subconscious of the majority of the Muslims in the world, there is a dislike for Muawiyah. And those who defend Muawiyah either defend him in the majority of cases because it has to do with their careers, it has to do with their paycheck, and it has to do with their connections and relations with the petrodollar. That's it. The majority of the others who come in and want to sort of innocently speak about the equalizing all the Sahaba, or giving the title to Sahaba to everyone who saw the Prophet, those are not, I think, in my opinion, the majority of people who take a strong stand against the deviation that began with Muawiyah. There's another person who relates the hadith. His name is Jarir al-Dhabbi, and he is mentioned in as-Sihah as-Sitta. His name is a reliable transmitter of the hadith. He used to curse Muawiyah. He used to use very strong language when Muawiyah is mentioned. And some, of course, what's going. This information is taken from Tahdhib al-Tahdhib by Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani. There's another person who was vouched for by Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal. His name is Abu Ghassan al-Nahdi. He hated Muawiyah. And I'm just here taking samples from the different areas of Islamic convictions or Islamic historical eras and telling you that if we begin to open our eyes at the political deviation that occurred early on in our history, then we will realize that we have been sleeping. Our political mind has been sleeping for centuries now. One of the compilers of hadith, An-Nasa'i, out of the 6 Sahih compilers of hadith, one of them was Imam An-Nasa'i. He went to Damascus, and Damascus was known to be the hub of the Umayyad dynasty. And he was asked about Muawiyah, and he had nothing good to say about him. And that resulted in his death. There's some details there, but this is the long and short of it. If you are located in an area such as An-Nasa'i was, and you took issue with one of these glamorous, shining public images, of course these rulers had that type of imagery because they are in charge of state powers, just like in today's world. You take issue with, go to Saudi Arabia in today's world, take issue with the king, and see what will happen to you. This has been happening. Committed Muslims are executed, just like Muawiyah used to do. This execution of committed Muslims, the imprisoning of committed Muslims, taking away the right of committed Muslims to move around, to travel. All of this was done early on, and it continues up until today. One of the statements that was considered offensive, one of the statements by An-Nasa'i that was considered offensive by those who were pro-Umayyads or pro-Muawiyah in particular, was that he quoted the Prophet as having said, "La ashba' Allahu batna." The Prophet was saying this concerning Muawiyah. And I'll get to, La ashba' Allahu batna means, may Allah cause his stomach not to be ever satiated or satisfied, because he had Muawiyah had a rabid appetite. And I'll get to this just a little later. And this is mentioned in Al-Hakim, in his book Al-Mustadrak ala Sahihayn. I should also mention here, when Mecca was liberated, the father of Muawiyah, Abu Sufyan, was with Al-Abbas, the uncle of our dear Prophet, alayhi wa alihi salatu wassalam. And what does Abu Sufyan say to Al-Abbas? He says to him, لَقَدْ أَصْبَحَ مُلْكُ إِبْنِ أَخِيكَ الْيَوْمَ عَظِيمًا. The domain, Abu Sufyan is saying to Al-Abbas, the domain or the dominion or the sphere of influence of your nephew today has become tremendous. Al-Abbas, the Prophet's uncle, responds to Abu Sufyan, says, إِنَّهَا النُّبُوَّةِ. Abu Sufyan was looking at the Prophet as a king, a potentate. And Al-Abbas, was the Prophet's uncle, was correcting him, saying, no, it's not that. It is the prophethood of Muhammad. إنها النبوة. In Bani Umayyah, the crowd of Muawiyah, there's a person, his name is Al-Hakam ibn Abi al-As. Once again, you can go and look him up in your sources, in your references of information. He used to mock the Prophet by imitating the way the Prophet walked. And these are the ones that after the liberation of Mecca are going to be called later on by the propaganda machine of Muawiyah and the Umayyad dynasty. They are going to be given the honorific of Sahaba, Al-Hakam ibn Abi al-As included. Marwan ibn al-Hakam, another counterpart of Muawiyah in the Umayyad dynasty. He was an insider during the Khilafah of Uthman. He was in the corridors of power, so to speak, when Uthman was ruling. And a very close scrutiny of our history during Uthman's reign would give us reason to believe that Marwan ibn al-Hakam was actually conspiring against Uthman. They come from the same Umayyad clan. But this is what happens when people are not Uthman, but the other Umayyads that come from Uthman's extended family were conspiring against one of their own, Al-Khalifa or Uthman, so that they themselves can gain power. And he was probably this Marwan was also probably the person who was responsible for the death of Talha ibn Ubaidillah. So this person is actually, according to one of the hadiths that is considered valid and authentic by some or by many, Talha is one of al-ashara al-mubasharina bil-jannah, one of the 10 who has the good fortune of the news expressed by the Prophet of those 10 who are going to enter paradise. So if Talha is like that, going to enter paradise, and Marwan was the one who was responsible for his death, killing him, then doesn't this raise a question mark in some people's mind to say, wait a minute here, we have to be very cautious with using this word as-Sahaba. Muawiyah, this is in Sahih al-Bukhari. Muawiyah goes to al-Madinah to secure allegiance for his son Yazid becoming the heir apparent, to becoming the successor of Muawiyah. And Muawiyah says, and I quote here, وَمَنْ كَانَ, he's talking to the people of al-Madinah, He's saying this publicly in front of everyone who's listening. And among those who were listening was Abdullah ibn Umar ibn al-Khattab. Umar's son Abdullah was in the crowd listening to Muawiyah, who is trying now to guarantee that his son becomes, that Yazid becomes the ruler after him, after Muawiyah. So Muawiyah says this, listen, my dear brothers and sisters, ومن كان يرى أنه أحق بهذا الأمر منا فليطلع لنا رأسه, and in another riwayah قرنه, فلنحن أحق به منه ومن أبيه, يعني عمر ibn al-Khattab. Okay, so what is Muawiyah saying here to the people of al-Madinah to try to turn Islamic rule into an oligarchy? He says, whoever of you thinks or sees that they are more qualified or deserve to be or should be in charge of the Muslims, let him show us his head and let him know that we merit this leadership more than him and his father. And this was a direct affront by Muawiyah to Abdullah ibn Umar. Wake up, those of you who think that Muawiyah is somehow similar to Abu Bakr and Umar and Uthman, etc. Wake up, smell the coffee. And then we have Qais ibn Sa'd ibn Ubadah. You know, there were the two Sa'ds in al-Madinah, Sa'd ibn Mu'adh and Sa'd ibn Ubadah. Qais, who's the son of Sa'd ibn Ubadah, says to Muawiyah, أنت دخلت في الإسلام كرها وخرجت منه طوعا. This means Ibn Sa'd is telling Muawiyah, you entered into Islam coercively, meaning because Islam was winning, you entered into Islam when you were weak. وَخَرَجْتَ مِنَ الْإِسْلَامِ طَوْعًا, and you have left Islam voluntarily when you became powerful. Isn't this something to think about? To bring down this false imagery of Muawiyah was a Khalifa? On one occasion, and this is in the books of Hadith, I remind you here, on one occasion, the Prophet, may Allah's peace and blessings be upon him, tells Ibn Abbas to go and summon Muawiyah. Tell Muawiyah that the Prophet is telling Ibn Abbas, tell Muawiyah to come here. I want to see him. When Ibn Abbas went to Muawiyah to invite him to see the Prophet, Muawiyah says to him, أنا آكل ولست متفرغا له. This is in Sahih Muslim. Muawiyah answers Ibn Abbas saying to him, I'm eating. I have no time for him. Meaning I have no time for Muhammad Rasulullah alayhi salatu wassalam. As we said, An-Nasa'i was killed because he could not say anything positive or favorable about Muawiyah. Muawiyah himself says, ما أترك الطعام شبعا ولكن إعياء. I don't stop eating because I feel full. I stop eating because I'm tired. He used to eat 7 times during the day. And when he was eating, he would appear exhausted and sweating. This is the person that some people still think that he is a Sahabi and he is a Khalifa. He is not a Sahabi, he's a Taliq. He is not a Khalifa, he is a king. He ate so much that his physique, his body was disfigured. He was fat, obese, and he did not look good. From, if you wanted to look up the information about him, he was not a good-looking person. He was the one who made it a sunnah to give the khutbah of al-Jumu'ah and al-Eid while sitting down. The Prophet, may Allah's peace and blessings be upon him and his, and all those who followed the Prophet, the Khulafa and the Imams, when they gave the khutbah while they were standing up. Muawiyah gave the khutbah while he was sitting down. We don't have, as far as I know, you can correct me if I'm wrong, I don't have any khutbah that was given by Muawiyah. No recorded khutbah that I can find that was delivered by Muawiyah. And then ask yourself, if everyone knew that the khutbah is delivered as the Prophet did it while standing up, why did Muawiyah begin doing it while he was sitting down? Is it because he could not stand up for that time period of the khutbah? Can't do that? You can't stand up for 30 minutes, give or take some minutes from that? What is it with you that even not only in your mentality and not only in your policies are you proving to be anti-Rasulullah, anti-Ahl al-Bayt, but you are also proving that in your own body you are a failure. And if it wasn't for the trappings of power and state, you would have been a non-person. But because you had, just like in today's world, we have the kings and presidents in today's world, they could care less about the sunnah of Rasulullah. They pay lip service just to get away with what they are doing. It's a camouflage for their policies. And in today's world, the problem with today's Muslims, the majority of them, as innocent as they are in a sense, they cannot identify the characteristics of Muawiyah in today's rulers. And they cannot see how there is a conversion between Bani Israel and Bani Umayyah in today's world. It is time for us to wake up and to begin to know what is happening to us and what has been happening in all of these years. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has provided us with that information, and may Allah guide us through our lifetime to live up to our higher Islamic responsibilities. Wallahu subhanahu wa ta'ala a'lam. وصلى الله على محمد وآل محمد. والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.